Welcome back to this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. I am your host, Matt Mayer. Before I get into today's content, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, share with friends and family if you like the content you've seen here today. There's a lot of things that have gone on in the news. I apologize to everyone out there. I actually made an episode last week. My audio was not working, so unfortunately, I had to scrap that episode. Then I was out of town, so I didn't really get a chance to remake that episode. But starting fresh this week, and what seems to be a very crazy start to this week. There's a lot of things that happened just today, Monday, April 15th of 2024. So jumping right into it, let's take a look at kind of the top stories from today. And unfortunately, this video is not loading, but it's okay. Let me see if I hit the pause, let me hit the play button. And doesn't seem to be loading, unfortunately. It was just loading 2 minutes ago. But you'll see here, it says people were getting out of their cars and making the long walk to the terminal so they didn't miss their flights. This was in Chicago at their biggest airport, O'Hare International Airport. It's actually one of the biggest airports in the country. There was pro-Palestinian protesters, if you can imagine that, in a liberal city, in a liberal state, shutting down the airport. So you might say, well, Matt, that's happened a lot. Well, it also happened in Seattle today. So not to be outdone, the craziness in Seattle, again, liberal city, liberal state, people getting shut out. These people, like you could see here in this video, it's a very short clip here, but you can see see my mouse right here, and you can see these the signs over here. They have the entire expressway blocked off. These people should be arrested and immediately placed in prison. There needs to be a huge blowback on these types of protests. Look, if they were standing on the side of the road, I couldn't care less. Go wave your flags, do whatever you want, have the signs, whatever you want to do. But when you start blocking traffic, that's already illegal, and it's dangerous not only to the protesters but the people in there. If they were blocking an emergency vehicle from getting through, which is quite possible, they should face even more time. And you see what happened to the peaceful protesters, people literally praying outside the door of an abortion clinic just a couple years ago in Tennessee, and those people are potentially facing up to 11 years in prison. Now, I don't ultimately think that they will get that long of a sentence, but it's still on the table, in the cards for those people, and they are not blocking a potential emergency there when it comes to abortion. If there was an abortion emergency, they'd be going to the emergency room. That's my point. So then, not to be outdone, here's New York. Death to America chants, burning an American flag. Does this happen in the point here? Is it happening in Tehran? Is it happening in Gaza? Nope, it's going in New York City. This is, so far we got Chicago, we got Seattle, we got New York City, all in one day, all pro-Palestinian protests. I've said this before, and I will continue to say it. There's 0% chance that, one, there aren't paid agitators in there. Feds, for sure. Now, are they the ones that orchestrated it? I don't know, but I know that they have. There's certainly people in there. And two, people are getting paid to be there. Not necessarily feds, just paid agitators. So these people are in these crowds. You probably can tell who they are. They always got masks on. Can barely even see their eyes. Sometimes they have their eyes covered. And those people are definitely in the crowds here today. I think that to have it in these many cities at the same time, like, there's no way that this was not coordinated at a higher level, not just some, random group getting together in all these major cities. And then, not to be outdone, the crazies in San Francisco decided to shut down the Golden Gate Bridge. And they shut down the Golden Gate Bridge for nearly 5 hours. It was over 4 hours they had the Golden Gate Bridge shut down for. And you could see the video here. Just the police are there. Why aren't these people arrested immediately? Why aren't they being arrested immediately? I can't say anything other than this is a liberal city in a liberal state, and if you're the police, you're afraid to do your job. Now, conversely, there was a video posted by Ron DeSantis staffer today showing what happens in Florida if this happens. They were pulling people, these protesters, out of the street and arresting them immediately, which is what they should be doing. But law enforcement has been handicapped in a lot of these states, and these people feel more and more emboldened, especially in these liberal cities where they aren't getting prosecuted. So it's all about, like, what is the narrative going forward for Israel Hamas, or Israel Palestine? And it's really against Hamas, right? Let's not kid ourselves. These protesters and the coverage that they're getting, it's putting a lot of pressure on the pro-Israel crowd, or the Israelis. And I'll cover a little bit more on what happened over the weekend between Iran and Israel, and how people, especially in the West, are seeing these things and think that there's this overflowing support for the people of Palestine, specifically when it comes to the battle between Israel and Hamas right now. Israel is obviously trying to eliminate Hamas from leadership there in Gaza, as they've terrorized Israel for more than 2 decades here. So they're controlling the narrative with these constant protests, and you've seen the support for Israel dwindle over the last 6 months since this whole conflict started. And it's going to continue to do it that way. It's going to continue to go that way, unfortunately, for Israel, because, again, this is what's being covered in the mainstream media, and they're going to push a narrative just like this here. This is a footage released by the police involving 96 shots. Chicago police shot the suspect 96 times after he opened fire on officers. Now, this says what happened correctly. This happened in Chicago, and the suspect here opened fired on the police officers, prompting a response from the police officers to fire back. Now, they fired a ridiculous numbers of shots, but at the same time, you can't be shooting at the police and not expect them to return fire, especially when there's multiple police officers. They're all going to be unloading clips, or maybe unloading multiple clips. And, this guy lost his life. They're calling some of the left-wing protesters, this is like George Floyd 2.0, claiming that this guy was unfairly killed by the police, which clearly, once you fire at police officers, they're going to fire back regardless of who was right and who was wrong prior to that. You fire at the police, you're going to end up getting dead. Like Dan Bongino says, don't get dead. This is a good way to get dead, firing at police officers. So, again, this is not the way that it's covered in mainstream media, though. They cover it showing a picture of this guy, and all it says is, black man killed in a police shooting with 96 shots on a routine traffic stop. They failed to mention in the headline that he fired at them first. Completely failed to mention that altogether. So continue with that right along those lines. This is a story that these police officers were recently exonerated for any wrongdoing, and you can see this snapshot here. It says, Texas man I can't breathe before being killed in police custody. Body cam video shows. Now, even the headline there, and this is New York Post, this is typically a conservative newspaper, says being killed in police custody. Keep struggling with that word there. Now, the funny thing about this is people started getting up in arms because this body camera footage just showed up. However, if you look at the date here, it says 11/29 of 2022. So this happened almost a year and a half ago, but the ruling to not press any charges just came down recently, and now everyone's kind of all up in arms saying that the police should have been charged, or somebody should have been charged in this man's death. And again, the headline's misleading. He wasn't killed. He died. He had a massive heart attack, unfortunately. A lot of adrenaline happening in these situations, I'm sure. I'm not sure if there was any type of toxicology report that revealed anything, but again, police have been exonerated, but now we're seeing this in the headlines, and surprise, surprise, it's election year. So you saw the last one that happened in Chicago. Again, the headlines there were black man killed by 96 shots in a routine traffic stop, failing to mention that he shot at officers first, prompting the response. And then this one saying being killed, but it should just say he died in police custody, not being killed. There's a difference between being killed and dying. And again, another misleading headline, New York Post this time, rather than the the liberal headlines is surprisingly from that one. And I came across this just the other day, and this is a senior editor, I believe, at NPR. I believe he deals with like business and economy. And he, in this article, it's a fascinating article. It's a longer read, but you should. It's up on my Twitter timeline. Give it a view. This guy here is talking about what has been happening at NPR for the last 25 years. Describes himself as a classic liberal, or at least even today's classic liberal, somebody you would 100%, like, just by looking at him and, you know, seeing what he does in terms of his profession, you would say he's liberal, and he absolutely admits that. But he goes on talking about what's happened to NPR over the years, talking about how they went from a newspaper or a news outlet that tried to cover things fairly, at least by his estimation, as long as probably 15 years, the first 15 years that he was with NPR. But over the last decade or so since Trump, they've really taken this hard left tilt, and everything that they cover is transgender this, it's systemic racism that. He's like, you plug in the narrative, the, you know, top 5 or 10 narratives, and boom, he's like, that's all that comes out of NPR now. And again, let's keep in mind that this is state-funded media, so it has a left-wing tilt, and you're paying for it, I'm paying for it, everyone's paying for this to get the left-wing Pravda media garbage that they're spewing out. So in this article, he mentions that he did a poll, he did a survey. He did some research of the people that were in the office, in the DC office, and of those people, 87 of them were Democrats, were registered Democrats, and 0 registered Republicans. He brought that up to people that were higher up, all the way up to the then CEO of the time, and the reaction was indifference. It wasn't even like they were mad at him for even bringing it up. They just didn't care. So when you see this article, or if you read this article, you can see what's kind of been happening at NPR, why they aren't trusted. He even goes on to say in this article how they boasted about they are more trusted than CNN, but CNN's trust rating, or the feedback that they had for CNN, the surveys were showing that like 27% of people trusted CNN, and they were at like 29 or 30. So it's like, it's not like they have a good base for trustworthiness. It's just that they're better than CNN because no one trusts them either. So what did they do? They go and hire this woman who just started in March as the new CEO. And he even mentions in the article he's hoping that she is going to turn things back around. But I mean, you could see this picture here, wearing a mask, a Biden hat, doesn't look promising for the prospects of them being even slightly left-leaning, or, you know, center left-leaning instead of hard left, you know, given that this woman now looks like she's going to be in charge, does not look like a center left-wing person. But there is good news that I've seen throughout the last month or so. So this article is from about a month ago, and it says the final act. It says the final act fears U.S. journalism crisis could destabilize the 2024 election. Of course, they're going to freak out because journalists have been getting laid off left and right for the last 6 months or so because nobody's buying the garbage anymore. No one's paying to be told how to think. So, in from this sub-headline here, it says job losses, declining circulations, and local newspaper closures could mean spread of misinformation in pivotal election year. They are freaking out because they don't have a stranglehold on information anymore. They did, essentially, from left-wing media sources that claim to be neutral, like NPR used to, AP claims to be, CBS, CNN, ABC, they all claim to be, and then the big tech outlets. The big tech outlets have certainly been hard left-leaning over the last decade, and it's been extremely obvious, not only in checking the donations from people that live there, or people that work there rather, that show that it's somewhere between 90 and 95% of the donations that are made are to Democrats or liberal causes versus the other side to conservative or Republican causes, or Republicans or conservative causes rather. And they lost that when Musk bought Twitter. They lost the stranglehold on big tech media the second Elon Musk bought Twitter. And he bought it as a guy who's been center left most of his life until the left went completely radical over the last 5 to 10 years. And Musk basically said, like, I've had enough of it. And he decided he was going to buy Twitter. So now the discourse in America has changed just on social media and big tech alone because of Musk. He's leveled the playing field, and they are freaking out. He used to be the golden boy of the left when he was making Teslas, and that was all he was doing. But as soon as he said, hey, this is unfair, we should have a more fair system, they freaked out. So then you see things like this. This is a large YouTube channel. I believe it looks like they have just under 1 million followers, the Cartier family. And it's just 4 young kids that make reaction videos to different things that they see. A lot of it's political. And these are the type of people that are waking up to the BS that they've been fed, or their families have been fed over the years, and they're just not buying it anymore. So let's take a listen. In this clip, they're talking about, so you'll see here it says Ted Cruz shuts down Bill Maher and leaves him speechless. But this was specifically, they were a little bit further on in this video. They were talking about the debate in 2019, 2020 for the Democrat nominee, and Joe Biden saying specifically what he was going to do with asylum seekers, and then coming through and actually doing that, and then realizing, well, shit, this is what he said he was going to do, and he's doing it. So, like, well, I don't understand how people are surprised by that. So here's their reaction to what Joe Biden just had to say about his policies and allowing asylum seekers.
So, like, what are we going to do about this? She said the best thing we should do right now is just give them their citizenship.
Yeah. They're trying to get
So,
more.
like,
They're trying to get
they
more
just
of them
brought them here with no solution for them to go anywhere.
So we see their playbook, right? We see their playbook, right? And their offense is attacking our defense because in their offense they have all these words, which is these trick plays and whatnot, xenophobic, racism.
Dude, this guy nails it. Like he gets into it right here. 100%. Like this is anything phobic, anything anything they don't like that goes against their narrative, or them trying to import all these voters, which is exactly what they're talking about. They're just going to throw these derogatory terms at people to make them back off their position.
Isms, phobias,
systemic
bigots,
racism,
systemic racism, Nazi rhetoric. Oh, they got all type of trick plays. They be having that Philly. What's it called? The Philly push.
Philly special.
No. What's the push? They be the tush push.
Oh, the tush
They be
push.
getting to that goal line, hitting that tush push. Boy.
You know what's funny
They can't
though?
play with me. I'm Bill Belichick. I see through this shit, man.
The words
Y'all
for the black
cannot-
people.
That's the thing, though.
Hey, they got words for everybody. As a white man, you're a Nazi. You're a racist.
And if you're black and you say you self-hating, you're a self-hating black person. You're a coon.
You're a
Transphobic.
bootlicker. Oh, they got words for you, boy.
You're a pawn for the Republican Party.
You're a pawn for the Republican Party. They're using you. You're a grifter. Oh boy,
How
they,
did you
just,
even
they got
agree?
all, they weaponize these words, and this is why liberals think they smart, because they use these words and it makes them feel smart. But really, it's all bullshit. Because if you have a phobia of something, that means you have a fear of it.
But if
so
you
if I'm not afraid of them, and I have no problem with them, I just have a problem with them being given a leg up with my tax dollars, well, I have to deal with all the consequences, the inflation. I have to pay to live, pay for them to live, and pay for myself to live as well. And they get free housing and all this stuff. Where's my free housing? I've been here my whole life. I was born here.
But
I ain't got no free housing.
If they have to use words to go around what they're really trying to say and not keep it straightforward, then that's a problem.
Oh, brother, no, because
Yeah, see, these guys nail it. They absolutely nail it. And they have been losing, especially black males, young black male votes. And you see these 4 guys here, they ain't buying the bullshit because they realize what's happening. And once you see these types of things, you don't unsee them. So these guys have seen it. They're not unseeing it. There's no way that they're going to fall for the something phobic, something ist. And the guy on the far left of the screen, he was talking about how they have words for everybody. Like for these guys, because they're black, they'd be bootlickers, coons, Uncle Toms, whatever. Like, and they're wise to it. They know that that's going, like, these are the type of guys that would go into a debate with a friend or family member and would know exactly where people are going because they've seen it before. They know the playbook. The playbook is so shallow. It's the same thing over and over and over again, and people are waking up to it. So it's the narrative control. Like that's what I've been talking about here. For somehow, some way, a international or at least a national pro-Palestinian protest day that shut down 2 major airports, shut down New York City or parts of New York City and the Golden Gate Bridge, all in the same day, right? And again, this is to control the narrative that there is more support. There's more people that believe that Hamas is on the side of good and Israel's on the side of evil, to flip that support that they have in the West. So when Joe Biden, as he's been slowly wavering off of his support of Israel, when he does flip that switch, it's because of this slow progression of showing all these pro-Palestinian protests and all this other crap that's been happening over the last 6 months and is presumably going to continue until something ends between Israel and Gaza, whether it's Israel actually backing off or them actually defeating Hamas completely in the Gaza Strip. But it allows them to shift the narrative to the more pro-Hamas. You could see it in the polling. The data from right after the October 7th attack to now has shifted in favor of Hamas in countries like the United States and in the West. Then you saw things like the Chicago police shooting, then the guy who died in police custody. That was 18 months ago. Again, the police are bad and they're targeting black people. That's bad. So they're going to continue with that narrative. But again, like I said, like I showed with The Guardian, mass layoffs happening all across the United States with legacy media. Then you see people like these guys here waking up to the bullshit. They're not going to buy it. Elon having Twitter. Things have changed dramatically over the last 4 years, and the narrative is starting to break down. They don't have the stranglehold on information that they used to. So, what these guys are saying here with the phobic and ist and all that crap, you're just going to see more of it. They're going to have to push that narrative even harder. Anything that goes against the narrative, they're going to have to attack now. And they're going to lose this battle. They're going to lose this battle and hopefully ultimately lose the war as well. Because I can't imagine that people are going to turn back to legacy media after being woken up out of their slumbers. And I'm one of those people. I was like that until 2020. I'm not going to go back to listening to legacy media. They have a long road to go to get people back in their good graces. So while that's happening, over the weekend, Iran strikes Israel with somewhere between 300 and 400 missile and drone strikes, and ultimately wasn't really much of a success for Iran. I don't think they really hit any major military targets, anything like that. Iron Dome took care of most, if not all these missiles and drone strikes. So, Israel was able to absorb that and kind of move forward. But Western world leaders are urging Israel not to retaliate after the Iranian strike. So imagine U.S. being attacked by a terrorist group that's funded by Iran, and the U.S. killing, and this was in retaliation for them. I believe it was in Syria that they had hit a couple of high-ranking Iranian military officials, and they'd killed them. So Iran responded with this attack. If that had happened under Trump, like when he killed that Soleimani and al-Baghdadi, if that had happened under Trump, Trump would have struck back, and nobody would have said boo to Trump and said, hey, like you shouldn't strike. They may have said it, but they wouldn't expect him to actually do anything. And the only reason is because the West hates Trump. But if that was Barack Obama if that was Joe Biden and this type of thing happened between the United States and Iran, nobody would be telling Biden or Obama to stand down, and nor should they. So you have this clown, Emmanuel Macron, saying, "We have condemned, we have intervened, and we will do everything to avoid escalation." But don't do it again, Iran. And you know what, Israel, don't strike back. Like, nothing says strength like the president of France saying, "Hey guys, can you please not do it again? Please not do it again." They're not going to buy it. If I was Israel, I wouldn't be listening to them. I'd be doing what I need to do to protect my people. That's their obligation. And you might not like the way that they do it. And you might say that they need to approach Gaza differently. Fine. But if this was the United States that had a terror attack, there are going to be civilian casualties. Unfortunately, that's the nature of war. Are they targeting them? There's no evidence that they are actually targeting them. The evidence is that Hamas, the elected government, and the military, essentially in Gaza, is hiding behind civilians. So you tell me who's wrong. If the U.S. was doing that, if they provoked Mexico, say, and Mexico came across the border, and they were looking for military targets and people in the military, and these people were hiding underneath hospitals. They had military facilities underneath hospitals. Who would be in the wrong there? The United States, because we would be using our citizens and our hospitals as shields to defend us. And that's what Hamas does. But the left absolutely loves Hamas. They refuse to take the right side in Israel. And again, Israel's made some mistakes. And they've apologized for some of those things. And you think about what happened to them just a couple of weeks ago when they hit that humanitarian food truck, and they apologized immediately, made some firings. Like, friendly fire happens all the time. It's just unfortunate. It's an unfortunate thing of war, and they actually made some firings. Remember, famously, Pat Tillman, the former NFL star, died of friendly fire, but the U.S. government lied for years about that, years, as propaganda to say to further their war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So they made the mistake and immediately admitted that they were wrong. So you tell me who's the bad guy, who's worse, the United States or Israel? I'm not even that pro-Israel. Like, I know that they've done some things wrong, but I'm just using that as an example. Look at what the U.S. did when Pat Tillman died. They lied about how he died to further their propaganda for the war in the Middle East. Israel admitted immediately that they thought it was terrorists that had taken over that truck, and they struck it because of that. Now, Israel was working with that group and letting them in to provide humanitarian aid. Why would they shoot those people? It makes no sense. But again, the U.S. has to pretend like we are this holier than thou administration, and we never get anything wrong, and if we do, we would certainly fess up to it. I mean, Biden still hasn't said anything about that family that he killed on his way out of Afghanistan after he got 13 American soldiers killed. They're like, oh well, those were suspected terrorists. It was like they were like farmers or something like that. They were shepherds, and they just killed this family. Never said anything. Like, no one got fired from that. But again, the false moral superiority that especially this administration takes is galling. Then today we had Trump doing his very first trial for his 4 criminal cases. Now, this is New York. This is the weakest of them. Everyone said this was a bunch of misdemeanors, if they were even chargeable, that had passed the statute of limitation, that they stretched into felonies to parade Trump into court. And this was the first case that was charged against him. If you remember, I believe it was March of 2023. And the judge here said he might not be able to attend Barron's graduation, his son Barron's graduation. He's not allowed to miss any court time. So instead of Trump being out there in the campaign trail, he has to be in court. And again, is this election interference? Of course it is. It absolutely is. I jokingly said, though, I give the judge a little bit of a pass here, not wanting to delay the trial anymore, wanting to make sure that they abide by those dates because, let's be honest, since Alvin Bragg has been the DA of Manhattan, he hasn't faced any cases at all. He refuses to charge anyone unless their last name is Trump. So it's, I give him a little bit of a pass there. He's like, oh my God, I finally got a case since this Alvin Bragg took over because he's just letting everyone go. So again, this is obviously a witch hunt. This is obviously a handful of charges that were stretched to be felonies. The left is eating it up. He's getting, if he would be lucky if he gets a somewhat fair jury. It's in Manhattan. It's an extremely liberal part of an extremely liberal city. I don't see how he gets a fair trial just because of the jury pool, the jury selection that he's going to get. If this was moved, say if somehow it got moved to Alabama tomorrow, in the middle of nowhere, Trump country, that was, 80% Trump, do you think that liberals would be complaining about how unfair the trial was going to be because the jury pool was going to be so pro-Trump? So, I mean, this is the exact same scenario here, but just in reverse. I don't ultimately know what's going to happen. Anything can happen at this point. Based on the legal case, it doesn't seem like it should stick. But like I said, you get a very anti-Trump jury in a very liberal part of New York City, and you might end up seeing a guilty verdict, and it'll be a shame if that happens. So, last thing here I just want to do is give an election update, and this is from Axios. You'll see here, and when Axios is saying it, it's very interesting that they're actually going to admit this, but it says views of Donald Trump's presidency have become far more positive since the fall of 2020, according to a new poll. So this poll is New York Times Siena College poll, and it has, I'm going to click on this, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Hope this doesn't mess up my audio. It shouldn't because there's no audio involved here. It says how voters say they remember the years during select administrations, and it's obviously, since it's Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, that's what they're going to show. Survey is about 1,100 people. And 42% say mostly good for America for Trump, and only 20 versus 25 for Biden. So a little bit more people not really good or bad on the side of Joe Biden. But I think the real damning thing is that there's a lot. And again, obviously more people are going to have opinions of what's happening right now. So you see the numbers that add up. It's a little bit more people have kind of decided there with Biden that it's mostly bad. So 46%, those aren't voters I can see you winning back over. I mean, if you think that 46% of voters think it's mostly bad and they could be won back over, that's probably not realistic. And you see then 52% say either mostly good or not really good or bad. So you can make the argument that those people are persuadable, or obviously the 25% are people that would likely be pro-Biden. And then Trump has got 42 and 23, so that's a total of 65 versus 33%. Again, mostly bad for 33%. Those are probably going to be your hardcore anti-Trumpers. I'm surprised that number isn't even higher than that. But I mean, that poll does not bode well for Joe Biden. 46%. You can't make that up, especially when 42% on the other side is say mostly good for Donald Trump. Those are tough numbers to overcome. Again, it's a poll. You take polls with a grain of salt. They've been wrong a lot and off by a lot over the last few election cycles, but they do provide some meaningful data. So if you're Trump, you shouldn't be running home and saying like we've won this thing and just hiding in the basement like Biden did in 2020. But at the same time, you probably feel pretty good about that poll. If you're Biden, you got to say, man, we got to get, 46% saying mostly bad. That's not a good number. And you really need to get some of those people kind of in the neutral column, because my God, I don't know how you go into election if those numbers are accurate and think you have a realistic shot of being reelected when nearly half of the country thinks that you were mostly bad, that America's been mostly bad since you've taken the reins. So that's not a good position for him. And then finally here, you look at this. This is very interesting. This was something that I don't know that I would have even had a realistic guess. But this is an EP poll from, it looks like February 20th through March 18th. There's about 2,500 participants. And really the interesting thing here is the new voters, the people that have voted in X amount of elections since 2018, and the favor, like how much they favor Donald Trump. The more people have voted over the last couple of years, or the last couple of election cycles rather, the less they favor Donald Trump. Now with white people, it's pretty negligible here down at the bottom. So they voted 2 or 3 times since 2018. So presumably 18, 20, and 22. Those people, it's an even split for white voters. The new white voters, the low propensity turnout voters, the 0 or 1 is very heavy Trump. And you see that with Hispanic voters too. You see basically a dead heat here for really anyone other than the voters have turned out for all 3 elections. You see 36-35. That's nothing for Biden. 40-40 and 39-39. That's a pretty even split. And again, the sample sizes on some of these are fairly low, so you don't really know how accurate these are gonna turn out. But you see the black support. And that, goes to show what I was talking about with the Cartier family there. Like, young black men seem to be gravitating more towards Trump. So you see this number, 32% support. That's and 42% for Biden for black voters who haven't voted at all since 2018. So presumably a lot of those people are younger, which is very interesting. Now, when you add them all up, it favors Biden slightly when you get to especially the people that have voted, the high propensity turnout voters, 50-39. That's a pretty sizable lead for Biden. But you need, if you're the GOP and you're Laura Trump, the new head of the RNC, you see these numbers, you gotta say, we need to get people registered to vote, because those people are going to be the people that can help us win this election for sure. Joe Biden needs to get the people that usually turn out to show up, and he needs a lower voter turnout according to this data here. So very interesting data indeed. This was posted, and this is from Interactive Polls. This is a very good Twitter account here. It's at IA Polls 2022. So give them a follow. They got really good data that they post, and it's something that's very useful in my opinion. So again, polls are wrong a lot. Take them all with a grain of salt, but it is something that I think if you're a Republican or somebody that's works for the RNC, whatever it might be, that's something you should certainly take into account and get some of these voters out. Well, that's it for this episode of the Mayoral Podcast. Please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe on your way out, and I will see you all in the next video.